Guilty Reuss, a French nobleman from the feudal age, who from a very young age would do atrocious acts in the company of his grandfather. His greatest influence would kidnap his cousin and marry her, leaving her months later. He would become a soldier and be a friend of Joan of Arc, which he would save on many occasions. After this he would go in search of the Philosopher's Stone, and on the path he would begin to kill many women and children, the latter of whom he tied on hooks, and after beating them and sexually abusing them, he grabbed a hammer and broke their heads, neck, or other times he did it with his own hands, and sometimes he kept their heads to have as trophies. Gil chose the prettiest ones. He called them his little angels. Sometimes he even continued abusing them after they were dead, or he opened them and channeled to be able to enjoy his abuse in a better way. Other times the form of death he used was to sit on the bodies of the little ones and move on their ribs to break them and kill them by suffocation. In addition, he also did this with women too, although it was more for punish them since he did not enjoy doing this to them. He was known in his lands as someone terrifying, since all the residents, when they saw him coming, would know that he would take their children. He also sometimes gilded his perversities in front of the parents and sacrificed them afterwards to these. It is also said that he once abused children and pregnant women in a satanic ritual. He was never able to find the stone, although his family would hear about everything he did, and for this he would be taken away before the justice, which would claim that when they went to capture him they would see how many of Gil's men were dancing around the castle, doing a kind of satanic ritual, using children's heads as a kind of lantern. He would be tried for more than 149 murders, with which he never regretted, and would say he would do it again if he could. He would be sentenced to death by hanging in 1440. Francisco Becerra Perez, immigrant who has always lived on the street. When he emigrated to Santiago de Chile he would continue living on the street. He never studied nor could he work. He was alone on the street with others in the same situation, begging for alms to survive. Besides this is not he had been born with one of his hands. It is not known when or how, but he would get into drinking, and in that excitement he would begin to make him miss children because, as he said, alcohol makes me excited. So Francisco Perez would miss out on children. More than 20 children and adolescents, many of whom were homeless. He abused them, and then with his remaining hand he strangled them. But when he took away Luis Vergara, a 6-year-old boy who had run away from home due to problems, intrafamilial investigation would begin, discovering that he had died strangled with one hand and that he also smelled of alcohol. But unfortunately Francisco would remain free, since the identity of the murderer was not attached to him, until a few days later a 17-year-old teenager he would arrive at the police station and tell them that a man on the street had tried to abuse him, but since he resisted he would try to strangle him with one hand. So the police began to go to different sectors where these people were held and interrogate them, until one day they were able to see Francisco very drunk, and so that he would not run away they would offer him alcohol. He would accept, and in that excitement that the drink generated in him he would confess everything. The police would arrest him for this, and although Francisco tried to deny everything he said he could not do anything, would be sentenced to death again. From a very young age he worked on his family's farm. Although he did study, he had a good relationship with his mother, whom he regarded as a god. He did not get along with his father and brother so well. His father would die from a heart attack caused by alcohol. His brother would also die because one night the farm caught fire in one of the fields, causing a fire, to which he would suffer asphyxiation due to the smoke, although it is said that it could have been Ergina. His mother would only suffer 2 strokes, the second of which had her for several weeks until she died. Ergin was devastated with this last death, since his mother meant everything to him, which is why he sometimes dressed and acted like her, and he also always cleaned the room where he slept, letting the house fall into filth little by little. He would also begin to become obsessed with gore, and for this reason, in 1954 he would commit his first murder, which was Mary Hogan, a bar owner who Med would shoot with a revolver, and then he would take the body to his house. He would also always make the joke that it was in his house every time someone talked about the case. After several years he would continue committing his crimes, although no one suspected since they saw him as a fool. Although this fort would stop when Med killed the hardware store worker, who would be killed like all the previous ones. Since if the son would report her missing, this would make the police investigate and come to the conclusion that it was Ed, since he was the only one who he was at the bar at that time. When the police went to Ed's house and questioned him, they saw how he would deny everything, although it would be discovered since in one of the rooms they on the roof tied like a pig. After this, the police arrested Ed, and it was discovered that he made all kinds of objects with his victims, which ranged from plates, lamps, paintings. He even made some pants and gloves from human skin, which he said he already used. He would also clarify that he did not abuse bodies and that he only transformed them into objects. He would be sentenced to be in a mental hospital and would die in 1984 from respiratory failure. Sylvia Maris, born in an extremely poor family in the state of Hermosillo, Sonora since forever, she would grow up and form a family which she put to work from a very early age, doing various jobs such as being a water carrier, also taking care of children and begging for alms on city buses. Maris was also quite religious and worshipped the Holy Death by giving her offerings of food, having paintings and praying to her every night. This was also instilled in her family, who together with Maris prayed so that they could get out of the situation of poverty. As well, years would pass and the family would get bigger until the idea of sacrificing people would occur to them, in order to make the Holy Death take them into account more and could give them more help, thus only convincing the family. And in December in 2009, he would murder his first victim, who was his own neighbor and friend, whom he merely distracted with a 200 peso bill so that she would pick it up and then decapitate her with an axe, using her head as an offering to the Holy Death. Watering the blood that flowed on the altar of the saint and then burying it on the outskirts so that they would not find it. So she just waited and waited for this to improve her situation, but unfortunately for her it did not, so she decided to get out of her situation. He would order one of his children to bring his son to do the ritual, to which he accepted, and in June 2010 the second murder would be carried out, making the little boy drink alcohol so that he would remain unconscious, and then one of the youngest daughters he would merely murder this man by offering him 30 stab wounds, in addition to devouring him and spreading his blood on the altar of the Holy Death. Then he would bury the body next to that of his neighbor, and so after a month he would commit his third murder, whom he would choose as his victim. His own grandson did this without his son knowing. Just like that, other members of the family would do the same thing they did to the previous child. They gotten drunk and then he